Well, hello, and a big welcome to Biotensegrity Party number 20, where we will be talking to Susan Lowell de Solorzano about her forthcoming Handspring book entitled Everything Moves, How Biotensegrity Informs Human Movement. My name is Graham Scarr, coming to you from Nottingham in the UK, and I'm joined by my co-host Chris Marita Clancy, who is in Deep Cove outside Vancouver in British Columbia. So give us a wave, Chris.
Hi, Graham. Hi, everybody. Nice to be here.
And busy stoking the boilers and making sure the ship stays afloat are our two technical officers. Rachel Tudor outside Olympia, Washington. Hello, Rachel. And Mariana Barreto from Mississauga, Toronto. Hi, Mariana.
Hi, everyone.
Thanks, guys. So before we move on, let's hear about our sponsors. I think, Rachel, you're doing that, is that right?
Yes, thanks, Graham. So our Tea Party is an all-volunteer production of the Stephen M. Levin Biotensegrity Archive. It's made possible in part through generous support from our great sponsors, starting with Handspring Publishing in East Lothian, Scotland. Handspring are producers of highly accessible, easily applied, research-based material for movement and manual therapy professionals. The amazing team at Handspring see publishing as an art as well as a science. For them, it's a human and intellectual enterprise as well as a business. They offer a generous discount coupon to those on the Biotensegrity Archive mailing list and to our Zoom participants. We are also generously supported by Chris Clancy's educational organization, Embodied Biotensegrity in Vancouver, British Columbia. For those of you looking to learn more about biotensegrity, Chris's programs are an excellent resource. Chris and I actually have an Intro to Biotensegrity webinar coming up on Wednesday, August 19th, 8 a.m. Pacific time in the US. She also has a course upcoming with Joanne Avison, and she and Susan in January will be doing a course based on Susan's book. So lots of good things. We're also supported by Artifact Pro of Madrid, Spain, where you can find gorgeously constructed tensegrity models, including models of the spine and pelvis. Artifact Pro also offers a generous discount coupon to our viewers on the archive mailing list and Zoom participants. So thank you, Artifact Pro. And finally, we're kindly supported by the British Fascia Symposium in the UK, which not only organizes their biannual BFS event, but several other exciting programs. So be sure to check them out too. Thanks, Graham, back to you.
All right, thanks, Rachel. And now we can let's first break the champagne bottle and turn the toast over to the founder of Biotensegrity, Stephen Levin. Hello, Steve.
Thank you, Graham. I really appreciate being given the opportunity to toast this wonderful group of people. I mean, this Biotensegrity Tea Party run by Susan, Graham, and Chris, and with the assistance of Mariana and Rachel, have not only kept Biotensegrity alive during this trying times, but have actually breathed new life into it by doing these wonderful things. And I really appreciate what they have done. And now Susan's coming out with a book, and Susan is a remarkable person who is, as she tells the story, sort of stumbled into my life and decided that she would hang around and see what else she can make of it. So I appreciate her. This book is remarkable and draws on her vast experience in kinesthetic learning, Tai Chi, and biotensegrity. And I toast you all.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Steve, cheers.
Yes.
Thanks, Steve.
So,
And
Graham,
thank you all.
Back to you.
before we move on, shall we ask people to turn off their videos for this next section of the YouTube live, because it gives a great picture for those people who are watching on YouTube. And if you're live on YouTube and have any questions, please do submit them into the comment section, because somebody, and I hope you two will decide whom, will be keeping an eye on those. You will? Okay, great. Thanks, Mariana. Okay, thanks, Graham.
All right, thanks, Chris. And now we can turn our attention to our guest speaker, Susan Lowell de Solorzano, who has many years' experience as a jazz singer in children's education and also many years studying and teaching the methods of classical Tai Chi. She became involved with Biotensegrity about 12 years ago and has since worked closely with Stephen Levin in developing Biotensegrity as it takes its place on the global scientific stage, including the first Biotensegrity interest group meeting in the US in 2012. So today we are going to talk about her new and very accessible handspring book, Everything Moves, How Biotensegrity Informs Human Movement. So welcome, Susan.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you, everybody. I feel like I've got all my supporters around me. It's really lovely. And I have to say, several of my contributors are here. I've got it on speaker view, so I can't see everybody, but Chris and Steve and Doug and Anastasia and Carol and Ed, at the very least, are out there. And if I missed anybody, I'm sorry.
So can I start with a question?
Please, please.
What made you start writing a book? I mean, you're going along one day doing one thing and then suddenly you're in the process of writing a book. What caused that?
Unfortunately, I have to report I've started to write a few different books. And and this ended up being one of them. And part of it had to do with the fact that I was trying to help Steve with his book. And then at some point I was talking to Serena and at Handspring, and the people at Handspring, guys, really are wonderful. And I said, well, I don't know how long it's going to be before Steve's ready to release a book. And yes, we are still working on it, by the way, I'll just say to everybody listening. But I said, but I've got an idea too, if you're ever interested. And she said, well, tell me more. And it kind of went from there.
Great.
So can I jump in here, Susan, and ask you then, obviously this book is different than what you're working on with Steve, and it's different than what Graham's written. Can you tell us what your main goal was and what your guiding ambition was in this particular book?
Yeah. Every little question has a huge answer, and I'm trying to keep them short, but I was one of those people who, when I built my first tensegrity, and it's the kind where you snip the little rubber bands and then it explodes outward. And I was just in shock because I didn't understand what had just happened in my own hands with something I had made. And all of a sudden, all these things I'd been studying in Tai Chi, these words from the Tai Chi classics that seemed to be, I don't know, woo-woo, let's just say, or just didn't make any sense. All of a sudden in my hands was this physical object that was doing everything that the classics are talking about that I didn't understand. One thing moves, everything moves is a line from the Tai Chi classics. And so then, of course, I wanted to, pull over my car whenever I saw somebody on the street and say, hey, have you heard of tensegrity? What about biotensegrity? But, within a few weeks, you start realizing that you're getting tiresome. So, but I really felt like it was important. And I don't know how important this is going to be to somebody else. I remember when I was writing my master's thesis in kinesthetic learning, I asked the professor for an example of a thesis he thought was a really good one. And he told me, and I looked it up, and it had nothing to do with my subject. But it was this wonderful thesis about the experience of painting. It included the paintings, the artwork, and the woman was going down the Colorado River and experiencing the river as she was doing watercolors of the river. It was wild. And I could never find that woman to thank her. So whenever we do something, we throw something out into the world, we don't know who it might help. I'm just hoping it will be helpful and useful. And I think that was probably my central motivation. Oh no, we're not going to cry.
Aw.
Sorry.
Did you learn, presumably you learned a lot yourself just by researching and writing it, did you? Or what do you think, what came out of it for you personally?
Oh my gosh, I was learning the whole time. And of course, you know, you go into it thinking, well, I know of this. And then you start writing about it. And then you think, wait a minute, do I know this? Or do I think I know this? And wait a minute, what about this? And it was great because I was able to discover things that there's no agreement on. I was so surprised to find out, you know, there's no agreed upon definition of life. Life, that's a pretty basic one. You know, there's no agreed upon definition among, you know, in the scientific field. And so I learned an incredible amount. And that's probably why the book took so long, because I'd have to stop and say, wait a minute, I can't write about this. I don't understand it well enough, or, you know, I thought I understood it and I realized I didn't, and that I'd have to go dive in some more, because I didn't want to present anything I didn't feel was going to be useful. And in order to be useful, it had to be reasonably accurate, which is why every chapter, and poor Graham and Steve know this, I made sure they went through every chapter, and Danielle Claude went through every chapter as well, for the first several chapters, until family obligations prevented her from doing so any further. But, you know, I really wanted it to be an accurate snapshot of where the field was at the time of the writing.
Yeah.
Of course, the field is changing even now as we speak.
Thanks, Susan. Do you want to add anything, Chris, or?
Yeah, well, just this process of writing the book, biotensegrity is such a huge concept. It's non-linear. When you're writing a book, we assume you start with an introduction and you go from chapter to chapter. How did you navigate that whole process of taking something non-linear and so big? How did you decide what to put in that book, and how to arrange it?
Yeah, thank you. That was fairly maddening, but also part of the great adventure. I will say the entire chapter 8 is up on the Handspring website. So I just want people to know if they wanted to take a peek.
And you also have a.
And yeah, and I've got it. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Graham. I do. Sorry. So maybe this is a good time for me to show you a little bit. Yes.
And while
Yes,
you're putting that up, I'll just let people know that Rachel just put in the link for the Handspring, for where the book is on Handspring. You can find chapter 8 there. Rachel, will you please put the coupon code in too? Handspring offers a really generous coupon code for people who attend these Biotensegrity parties on Zoom. And if you're watching this on YouTube and you want to join us next week or anytime on Zoom, please sign up for the Biotensegrity Archive weekly newsletter. And maybe Mariana, could you put that, is it possible to put that link up on YouTube? Thanks. Go ahead, Susan.
Thanks. Well, this is in the book. It's not the cover of the book, but this is a picture. It's the caption says "Living Model of the Fourth Bridge." You can see the image of the bridge behind, that's on the side of the barn. This is a bridge in Scotland near Handspring, actually, and the engineers are showing you in this why the bridge works, and the weight of the gentleman sitting in the middle was one of the engineers. They're all designers and architects and engineers on the bridge. His weight is being borne by the bundle of bricks on either side of the sitting gentleman. And those forces, that force of the weight pushing down with the gentleman on the middle, is going through compression through these broomsticks or whatever they've got while they're sitting on the chairs there. And then their arms are being pulled. Their arms are in tension. So when we are studying biotensegrity, we are looking at physical models that will help us understand force distribution, force management, but we're doing it in this tensegrity system, which at the time of the building of the fourth bridge, of course, hadn't been discovered. So here's, that's the cover, which is, Graham said it's like candy. And again, I want to thank all my wonderful contributors. And let's see if I can move to the next slide. Let's see, there we go. These are just a few pages from the triangles chapter. I think I have a processing thing going on where it's flipping before I expect, but the whole book has not only the text, I've got some quotes that are in there, some images that I'm hoping will spark kind of, you know, when we see things, we feel things, you know, that kind of understanding. And so when you do go out in the world and you wander around, whoops, now I've gone way back, in the natural world, that you'll begin to get a sense of what you're seeing when you see a tree, when you see a, you know, an animal, what's going on in terms of their structure, their force management.
It's a very hands-on book. There's lots of exercises and little snippets of information, as I noticed there.
Yeah, at just about every turn,
That's it.
I'm asking you to stop and build something or feel something or move in a way where you're, you know, exploring a certain principle. You know, so if you're playing with the rope loop, you're feeling, you're putting a circle of tensile, tensioned line around your body and playing with it, because Snelson's definition of tensegrity has the tensional cables on the outside and the compression struts on the inside. So I tried to do a bit of that. Christy, you had a question?
Oh, it's beautiful, Susan. I can't wait to have a hard copy in my hands. Just according to this, you know, you have so many experientials. You've got the model building, you've got the kinesthetic practices. How do I feel in my body? That picture that you just showed us with the rope around as well. There's inquiries in there, little boxes with inquiries. Why was it so important to include these in your book? Because it's full of experientials, which I love. I know my answer, but I'm really curious to know your motivation and why you think that's important.
Yeah, well, I think that this has to do with my kinesthetic learning training, which has to do with my way of learning. I mean, again, until I felt that with the model, I didn't understand it. And I've actually had like online discussions with people, and you know, they're going back and forth with me, you know, that I'm doing consulting or whatever, and they're going back and forth about tensegrity, and I'll say, well, take your model and do this, and do you notice this? And this way back, this one person said, well, my model's on paper. Okay, we can't go any further, right? Because if you haven't felt this in the model, you can tell yourself you understand it because you've seen it in a video, but I go back to the model even now after all these years, all the time, to learn. Okay, this is still teaching me, and so you have to have the experience. And that was another thing that took so long. I got to a certain point in the book and I thought, God, if they don't have a model, they won't be able to understand anything of what I'm writing. And that's when I put that on YouTube, I put up collapsible tensegrity and how to build one, because I realized it didn't make any sense for this book to come out if there wasn't a way for people to build their own tensegrity.
Well, and I've been using that video, that concept in all of my courses, because I agree with you. It's important to make these structures. And I just want to say and to thank you for the way that you've offered these opportunities in a way that is accessible. Like, yes, we can use geomegs. Yes, we can get fancy structures, although they are hard to come by. I mean, Doug Johnson has this gorgeous model that he got from Tom Flemons. Well, we can't get those anymore. Your model that you just held up by Bruce Hamilton, I don't think those are available anymore. I tried to get one, and you have made it so that anybody can take your instructions and adapt them. So whether we're in COVID lockdown and using chopsticks from our drawers or toothpicks and marshmallows, or in my case, raisins, you give us that, which is, it's great. And I'm sure there are people on this call that were on the Shifting Paradigms course that have had just as much fun as I have. So thank you for that. Thanks.
I left this up for a second. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Because this is an example of what we learn when we're learning about biotensegrity, to me. Where on the left is a photo I took at Dumbarton Oaks here in Washington, D.C. of a tree and its roots in the fall. And next to it is this picture from Ramon Lowell, is from 1295, okay? And it's a picture of its tree, and there are the people, and there are the roots. So often we're looking at trees and we're not seeing the roots. So we're not seeing the whole system. This is from my chapter on systems. So on the right, you see what used to be considered a map of the, well, on the right-hand page that you see on the left side, a map of how they used to map the lymph system. And they just said it stops at the neck. But if you understand, you know, a tree comes from the acorn or whatever the seed is, every part of the tree is always connected to every other part from the beginning. Nothing's ever separate and assembled, you know, in an external way. It's all done on site, right? You would say there's a problem with that when you see that the lymph system would all of a sudden stop at the neck. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't make any sense. Well, indeed, a few years ago, on the right, you see a new model of the new map of the lymph system. They discovered the connection into the brain, into the head. And they said, oh, we'll have to rewrite the textbooks. And so we can never assume we know everything. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, science is always emerging, but I really believe that when we learn about biotensegrity, we can just, I don't know, it just opens an incredible number of pathways to new understandings. And Chris, I apologize, this was at the end of the sequence, but this is the order of the chapters. And I'll just say that, so I realized that people without a model, they weren't going to be able to get anywhere with this. So at the beginning, I sort of outlined what's going to be in the book. the introduction has a lot of the history and my contributors talking about how they apply it to their work. But then we start with push and pull, because if you don't have a basic understanding of push and pull, you're not going to get anywhere with biotensegrity, because the tensegrity model is made of push and pull. And indeed, as you'll see, that's what makes the world go round, is that balance of push and pull at all scale levels. And harmonious concatenation is a phrase from Darcy Wentworth Thompson, one of our heroes in the story, right? And that's the tensegrity chapter, except that they're all about tensegrity and biotensegrity. So then we break it down and start from the very simplest, the amazing triangles. And then from there, we go from flat to space with shape, space, and volume. And then when you start to build these models, you will see how the spirals emerge from the straight line of energy that are created, lines of energy that are created with push or pull. These spirals emerge, as well as other patterns like fractals. So now we're over to chapter 9. And then of course, the whole thing oscillates. Again, we're just talking about the model here and inert material. But if you don't understand the basic qualities of the inert material, how are you going to understand what a living organism can do with those qualities? And then of course, auxeticity, which is that omnidirectional expansion and condensation. That is another quality that the geometry of the structure presents. This is a quality that emerges when you get the right configuration of push and pull, tension and compression, which auxeticity is of course one of the qualities, one of the many possible qualities of soft matter. And then because sticks and strings working together make something entirely new that either one sitting on the table by itself wouldn't be able to do, it's indeed a system. And so we have to understand systems. So we go through all of that before we ever get to biology. And to realize that when I was writing the book kind of blew my mind, because it's like, okay, it has to be this way. And then we go through biology, and then the closed kinematic chains, which allow you to then start to apply all of the above into the biological system.
Yeah.
So
Susan, this is the first time I've seen a sort of complete version of it. I've read lots of the book over the last few months and couple of years. The thing that really struck me about it is that it's accessible, how accessible it is to both the beginner and the seasoned biotensegrity freak, or whatever we want to call ourselves.
I think you coined a term there, Graham.
All right. Because you've got the simple models, the simple stuff that you can do with sticks and bits of string and raisins and toothpicks and all sorts of simple things, but it wanders off into all sorts of much higher level stuff for everyone to learn. And then ultimately it's the people ask, how can biotensegrity be applied in practice, in treatment or robotics or whatever it is. And this is a great way into all of those subjects. It's so colorful. It is colorful and hands-on.
Thank you. Well, and as you know, Graham, there were also times when you and I and Steve and Daniel Claude, or the three of us, you and I and Steve, would have to stop and go back and forth for a week or two on a certain little tiny corner of the understanding, because it was so important that I made sure that we found where the agreement was among us. And then if I differed, I could just say, well, and I think this, but really most of it is what's pretty much agreed upon by all of us. But It's another reason it took so much time, right?
Yes.
It's hard to make it easy.
And you've done a great job at it. And looking at your table of contents, and back to this question about nonlinearity, you have presented it in such a way, you're giving us the basics first. And I have to say, as someone who, you have mentored me, you've taught courses with me, and I've seen you become better and better at that over the years that I've known you through writing this book. Where was I going with this? I remember you saying how challenging it was, but presenting it the way you do, you're always giving the basics first. You're always going back to that to give us, to remind us of the ground that we're standing on, and then adding these new concepts, which I know is helpful for me. Gets back to exactly what you said about we sometimes, suddenly realize, oh, I didn't really understand that as well as I thought I did. But also, you wrote it in this way, presented it in this way to make it accessible. And yet it is something, it's more like a Mobius strip, because once you've read it once, you can go back, and every time you pick it up, just like in your book, Graham, you learn something new because you're bringing a different level of background knowledge and experience to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I do want to invite people to start adding their questions into the chat. And as they do that, Susan, I do have another question for you. And actually, I've got so many, but I've got one that I'm hoping you'll address right now. And that is, who's this book for? Who will want this book? And I know there are many people in many different categories. And what will they get out of it? So, wide open question. Can you tell us some of the different kind of categories or of people or that will want this book and what they'll get out of it, from the beginner to people like Graham? I know, Graham, you've mentioned how you've learned from this, to the body worker, the movement person, academics.
Yeah.
The book set up that it's a course, right? Go ahead.
Right. So yeah, I did try to structure it so if somebody wanted to take it and use it as a syllabus for a course, that they could do that.
So teachers,
as the core of that, but teachers, I mean, my first kind of focus in terms of audience is the movement teacher.
once they know, yeah, okay.
And the experienced movement teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Because although, in my heart of hearts, I hope that it would be useful to anybody, the slime mold scientist, anybody who's studying living organisms, the cricket player, who's trying to get better at cricket, anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But the movement, the experienced movement teacher, and I say experienced because these are people who have been doing research, okay, not codified in a scholarly, academic, scientific way, because they're using a different mode of inquiry. They're using their own discovered modes of inquiry, and this modes of inquiry is a term that I learned when I went to Hampshire College, where we learned the different modes of inquiry of different fields.
Can you fill us in a little bit more on that?
Yeah, it's the way somebody in that field goes about solving a problem, asking a question.
For example?
So if you're, let's take my glasses. Okay, these have holes in them, and some people say, why does she always want to look mysterious? It's just I want to see clearly. So somebody who's coming from a film background, right, would be, or an arts background, might be looking at me wearing dark glasses and all of the artistic and kind of just in the arts, film, photography, whatever concepts that have to do with, being mysterious with dark glasses. That's what would bubble up here. A scientist who understands the camera principle would have a different mode of inquiry with how to discuss what's going on here, you know. And social science would be in its own pocket that's kind of a little in between the two almost, you know. And then natural science, you know, the kind of pure sciences as opposed to applied sciences. You'd be looking at the engineering of this as how does this solve that problem of clarifying my vision, and the biologist would be just looking at what's going on at the biological level, what is happening when this happens.
So in reference to your book, I, as you know, taught yoga for many years as a person who experiences and learns by entering into my body. That might be what I really zero in on. And now as a person who's sharing biotensegrity through the online platform, through discussions and presentations, I mean, there's all of these model building experiences, not to mention just the vast amount of information and how well it's presented. Now, what about the academic? I know
yeah, so let me just say before we go there that so these movement teachers, for example, that are experienced, they've been doing research, they have an incredible amount of data, but they may not think of it that way. Do you see what I mean? They haven't codified it in the way that data are codified in the sciences, but it doesn't mean it's not valuable. And anybody who listened to Brad Fullerton a couple of weeks ago was talking about how science is going to really be able to make a huge leap forward when different people from different disciplines are able to come together and find a way to collaborate on new kinds of research that might emerge. And so, yeah, for the for somebody who's in the more academic scholastic room of the house, I did try to be, you know, a good girl in terms of making sure that if I said something, I was saying, you know, either this is my thought as a possibility, or this is documented. So if I make a statement, it's either that I found it so many places in the sciences that I felt like I didn't need documentation because it's an established understanding, or I would give the citation. So I tried to be, I think the way to address the academic and scholarly community is to have good scholarship, which I tried to do.
And I think we've got,
Sorry, Chris.
Go ahead, Graham.
Just saying something for everyone. The book has got something for everyone. Scholars as well. Sorry, Chris.
No, Graham.
No, not at all. I was just going to say, we do have some exciting things happening with people in academic communities tapping into biotensegrity now. And I was just trying to
Well, can we put it to Graham? I mean, Graham, you're a chartered biologist. You know, does this book hold any value for somebody? You know, you're one of the top minds in the field. Does it hold value?
Well, absolutely. When I did my high school equivalent of biology, we had a really thick textbook about this thick, had 2 volumes, they're both this thick, and there were no pictures in it. A biology book with no pictures. How I learned anything, I don't know. But this book is just full of pictures, because pictures say so much that the written word can get a bit tedious. That's why it's got so much. The pictures, you can look at them, you can dwell on them, and you can read the words as well if you like. But yeah, that's why it's so great.
Thank you.
And Patricia has a question and a comment for you. Patricia, are you, or Mariana, will you be able to unmute Patricia, please? And
Yes.
Patricia, can you turn your camera on, please? There we go.
Just like we do have like a lot of comments before Patricia.
Oh, I'm
so
sorry.
it's okay. Hold on. I'm muting myself.
I was
Okay.
looking mostly for
Just,
questions.
I mean, yeah, it's like, just to tell you, Susan, I'm copying them so you can read them one by one, but everybody's just waiting for your book. Like, oh, we can't wait. We like the way you set it up. It's like, we are just happy that this is finally out and we can get it. So yes, Patricia, go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, hi. Like others, I'm excited. Just the table of contents is like a great summary of what I've learned about biotensegrity so far. So it made me really curious about, you know, one or two chapter headings or topics that were like almost made it in, but not quite, and why.
Ooh,
Good
you mean
question.
what do I have to say for the next book?
Yeah, if you want to take it there, go ahead.
Well, I'll just say, you know, when I was writing my master's thesis, and it wasn't that long ago, I got one kind of late in the game. In order to be able to stop writing, in order to be able to close the loop and put a conclusion on and tie the ribbon and all that stuff, I created a chapter called Future Directions, you know, other concepts and future directions or something like that, where I could create a bucket for myself where I could throw all the things that were no way going to fit, because truly nothing has edges, right? I have that quote in the book from the philosophers, you know, God is a sphere whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is truly nowhere. And so nothing has a clear edge. And so there never is a place to stop. So what's not in the book, hyperbolics, not in the book, Penrose tiling, not in the book. I mean, a lot of things, but I'm not going to take up my time to pick up I have a list of this is not in the book. I had to leave this out. And there were a lot of things, but I wanted to just give people enough of a start where they could have a central codified bunch of stuff that when they wander out into their different directions with it, they could come back to.
Yes.
Thank you. Mariana, do you have some more questions?
Yes. Here, well, Chris, no, sorry, I lost it. Yeah, Kelly's asking when it's going to be available in the US. I think it is already, right?
Okay, so it's available for pre-order today, but I think they call it back ordered in the US because they have to print them, put them on a boat, sail them across the Atlantic Ocean, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think they will be in our hands physically until maybe late October.
I actually think that they print a US version in the US, I believe, but
Okay.
we've heard about that. So,
Well, if Andrew's still
Can
Can I
here.
jump in here?
Hello.
Oh, go ahead, Andrew.
Shall I go ahead? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, Graham, it's
Ah.
printing in Europe. It's not printed yet. I don't think it's gone to press quite yet. It's usually going to press in the next few days, but there were some last minute corrections. It'll take probably up to 4 weeks to print and then about 4 weeks to ship to the US. So we're looking at about 8 weeks from now.
And Andrew, does the ebook come out at the same time, or?
Sorry?
And what about an ebook? When does it come out?
The ebook will be available once we have the early copies of the print version. So
Okay, thanks. That's
soon
important
as
for
we
us in
have
Canada, and we have people
embodied
all over the world
and
here.
check, yeah, as soon as we're able to check it, we don't want to launch the e-version until we've had a chance to check and really make sure the print version is right. But as soon as that, the e-version will go live. So that will be in about, I'd say about 4 weeks time.
Right, and anybody who signs up for the Handspring newsletter will get notification of when that happens. And
That's
if
correct.
you can send us an email or something, I'm sure that Rachel will put that into our newsletter as well.
We've already got quite a list of people who've indicated they want to know when the book's available. So they will be contacted by email once the book is available. They'll get an email telling them.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, I just want to say too that I'm seeing in the chat that Melanie Sever, I don't know how to pronounce your last name, Melanie, sorry. Melanie has looked on the US website where it says she can't pre-order, but I know the folks at Handspring are going to be taking a look into that. So by next Wednesday, when we send out the Biotensegrity Archive newsletter, it'll be all fixed up, right, Andrew?
Yeah, I'm puzzled a bit about that. And if privately you could send me a screenshot and show me what you're seeing, because I'm puzzled because I've seen already since this tea party started, I've seen at least one pre-order for the book come through from an address in North America.
Oh, and that was from Doug. Maybe you need to clear your cookies, Melanie. Go to a different search engine or something.
Yeah.
Could be in your history somehow, an older version coming. Yeah.
Yes. I don't know if we could invite Carol, because you put here a good comment. Maybe we can just open up the conversation about, I mean, after Susan, we have to read everything because as I said, we're all excited about this, but I think Carol, between Carol and Kelly, they were talking like how you think you understand something, but you don't until you read it again. So I don't know,
Okay.
Carol, are you there?
Maybe
There you
I'm
are.
Carol and Kelly, and
Yes. So
We
I'm
can hear-
unmuting them. There you go. And Kelly,
And
where
then
are
after that, there's a
you?
question from Summer too.
okay, great.
I don't see Kelly. Okay, Carol, I think you can talk now. While
Yes, I
I'm finding
can.
Kelly. Yes, go ahead.
Well, I was honored to be asked to read this advanced copy, to write a recommendation or to write an expression of what I thought of it, whether it was recommended or not. And I started reading it, and I've been asked to do this a couple times before, and it's always been a pleasure to read people's work. But this was significantly different. I would read it, I would read a little bit, and even if she didn't ask me, I'd be thinking about something, and then I'd have to get up and walk around and let that kind of just sink in. And the one piece that I'm thinking about now is auxecity, and the whole concept of the expansion with the stretch, and how I just could not wrap my head around that. For me, a stretching is making thinner. And so I accepted it always. I just always accepted it. This is soft tissue. And then I started to play a little bit with my, I suppose all of you have done this with my Holman's, and the breathing kind of thing, and how the lungs, when you're breathing in and you're stretching open, and how it expands like that. And so I began to just play with things like that. And I'm just so interested in art and architecture and history. And she builds this marvelous history about tensegrity, and it goes way, 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 way back to the first ideas about tensegrity as a different way of building. And I just would get lost in it, and I wouldn't want to move on. I'd want to stay right there. I'd want to be in that for a while. So it was a very different experience for me in reading a book. And I was sitting by my plant in my other room. And at one point I just turned and I started stroking this plant. And it almost like I became one with the plant, just based on the kinds of things that Susan was saying. And I thought, I've never had this experience in my whole life. And it was winter. And so there was a fire downstairs in the fireplace. And I ran downstairs and I told my sister, I said, I just can't believe this experience I'm having with this book. I've never had this experience before. I was supposed to write like 2 sentences about, yeah, this is a good book, you should buy it. I wrote a whole page about why this book is going to add to the general, I mean, like the Tea Party opens up the world of this information to so many different ways of thinking and feeling and learning modes and so forth. This book will just invite all of that in. I can't wait to hold it I have it on my iPad, but I can't wait to hold it in my hands.
Me too. Sorry, Susan, before you jump in and respond to that, and before Kelly comes on, it would be a great time for anybody who wants to turn on their video as we come into this more conversational community aspect of the Biotensegrity Party. Okay, go ahead, Susan, and then Kelly.
Well, no, I was gonna say, and my understanding was that Kelly and Carol were going back and forth on something, so I wanted to get Kelly's perspective, and thank you, Carol.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Thank you.
No, I don't really have anything to add other than Carol's just making me super excited about the book and everything that you've said, Susan. I just really appreciate how you have taken such complex concepts and have put them in a chapter format. I'm just really excited to read it, and I'm excited to share it with my students. And yeah, way to go. So congratulations.
Thank you. I'll tell you, Kelly, Danielle Claude Martin, I'm sure already know this, says in her book, what's great about tensegrity is that it's teaching us about complexity, but through a very kind of simple, I don't remember, she puts it really well, through a very simple kind of lens or framework where we're starting with just push and pull, tension and compression. And we go from a two-party system, yin and yang, and we get into everything. So.
Right. Yes, we have a question from Samar. She's asking, oh, Samar, would you like to ask it yourself? Let me find you. Here you are.
Samar.
Yeah, you're on now. Here you are.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi, Susan. Thank you so much. I can't wait to look at this book. It just looks amazing, looks brilliant. So my question was, I'm just really curious about how you described or how you explained movement based on biotensegrity in the book.
How I explain movement.
How does movement happen? Like what starts it? And...
Nothing's not moving. So when you ask that question, do you mean the human body's movement or movement? Because when I hear the word movement, in my mind, I am going all the way from nano level up and out to universal and everything in between. And there's nothing that's not moving.
Yeah, I meant the human body. I've had this discussion over the past few days because there's this guy that, another professional in our field, and he was quoting Gary, I think it was Gary Ward, who said, joints act, muscles react. And I had a problem with that because I don't believe that movement starts in the joint. I was telling him that it's the global tensional network.
Yeah.
That's where movement happens. And, I just wanted to kind of extend the question to you.
Yeah, this is great. And I would encourage you on the Biotensegrity Archive YouTube page, there are a number of videos. And one is a conversation that Steve and Karen Kirkness and I had a couple years ago when she was visiting. And she's saying, so where does human movement come from? Something like that. And Steve says it comes from chi. But something happens and something is initiated and nothing isn't part of it. Like you can look at the scientific studies from before the movement, before the awareness of the movement, there's already stuff going on. So when you then imply intention, if I just say, let's just right now, okay, just right now, I want you to not change anything in what you're doing, but just imagine your right foot is getting heavy, 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 heavy. Now, without even moving, I think you might be able to feel your internal organizational, structural everythingness. So I don't break it up into this piece that we call a muscle, this piece that we call a bone. I really don't get cadaveristically anatomical about the body, right? And because I am coming from a Tai Chi background, we never looked at it that way anyway, so I never needed to. But if you start just putting your mind in one foot, you'll feel your body reorganizing itself to do something that has to do with that foot bearing load or being heavy. You'll feel the reconfiguration. I don't think you may think you don't feel it in your left ear or your whatever. You may think there's a place where you don't really feel it, but if you really sit with it and breathe and experience, I think you'll find that nothing's not involved. I hope that helps. Or as I say to my Tai Chi students, did I sufficiently avoid answering your question?
No, it does, because I do experientially, I feel it. Like everything you talked about, I do feel it experientially, but it's hard for me to put it into words. And this guy comes from he's an engineer, so he comes from that background that he doesn't get it. And I don't know how to explain it to him.
But I have to say, there's a lot of engineering in here, but it's not the kind we thought we were looking at.
Yeah.
You know, not, oh, look, hey, Bill, the shoulder blade just got in from New Jersey. Okay, we can add it. You know, it's everything comes up out of the oneness that was there already.
Thank you.
Great, Susan. Anastasi, he has something to say, so come on.
Anastasi, and I'll say Anastasi, Doug, these are my contributors. I'm so grateful.
Well, I guess I'm just putting in a plug. I wrote it in the chat, but just to say that it was unexpected. When I got the book to look at it, I was like, oh my God, this is like an art book. This is so pretty on one level. There were so many amazing images that were not just amazing to behold, they were informative and like Carol said, you need time to almost digest. And so it's a really it was a surprise. And I love Graham's book because of all the images in it, but I think Susan went one step further. There are so many amazing contrasts and elements that are defined by these images and the text. So I'm just putting out a plug for the book.
Thank you. Hey, Gavin. Gavin,
actually,
there? Oh, there we go.
There.
Okay.
We do that, Susan.
Sorry, we saw your screen for a minute. Thank you, Gavin, for being out there.
I enjoyed the book. The problem is translating the ideas into my world as an orthodontist. I like it. I share many of the sympathies, but my audience, my initial audience, is going to be a number of very practical people who do things with their hands, with appliances. And I think it's a big help for them to understand what we're trying to do here. But it's not been an easy road to go, convincing my orthodontic colleagues that this has if any relevance in their world. And this would be a help in establishing that, I think.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I certainly
Rachel,
promote it, but I think I have to choose my audience who are at least on the road to understanding and would welcome it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Mariana?
Yes, Rachel, she wanted to say something as well.
Yes.
Sure, I wrote in the chat and I just wanted to reiterate in learning from Susan and Chris in shifting paradigms, a lot of the things that I'm seeing are coming in the book, model making, holding those things in your hands. I think so many of us here are movers and kinesthetic learners, movement professionals. Manual, everything we feel is so informative to us. And I can just attest from my own experience that having these different feel sets from the model making and the discussion was so helpful and so informative to me. And also, she helped me heal from math trauma, which I think a lot of us have experienced, and not be afraid of math, embrace it to the extent that you need to. So thank you so much. I can't wait to get the book.
Thank you.
Yes.
And can I just reiterate, anybody who wants to turn on their video, you can go ahead and do so, because we're going into that sort of party mode for the event. So yeah, Mariana, sorry.
Yes, I just want to say here, Aileen, she's saying that we need to experience this. Like I'm going to read it. She said, people need to feel it to believe it. I think this is a response to Gavin, not just to think about it, right? And I would add myself, what you said before, like, if I have doubt, I will go back to my model and just play with it and maybe do something, I don't know, bounce it or disarm and put it together again. And every time I do that, I will learn something more from the experience, right? So yeah, I agree with that. Let me see. Okay, here, Maggie, do you want to come out? Like, let me see, where are you? I think all of you have the power to unmute yourself if you want to. But I just want to keep an order here. So Maggie, hold on. I'm having a hard time finding you.
She's here.
Okay,
Hello,
are you
beautiful.
out?
Yeah.
There you are, okay.
It was funny, I was teaching my class yesterday and suddenly thought, you know, how disruptive it is when you've injured one small part of your foot and you can't do anything and your whole self is galumphing around the house because you feel uncomfortable. And I realized that was one way one could attempt to convey how very interconnected everything is, that nothing's really left out. Your spirit isn't left out. You know, the way you feel when you're eating isn't left out. I had a sore tooth. Gavin reminded me of this. I had a sore tooth once and it was unbelievably painful. And I'm not a suicidal person, but I realized how feeling suicidal might feel. And then I called the emergency dentist people at 12:30 at night, not because I thought they could do anything, but just to tell someone how utterly miserable I was and to cry to an active listener about how much in pain I was. It was a really peculiar but whole self-dominating experience. So even the teeth can do that. That's all.
That's great. Thank you. And Carol and Ed, we've got a lot of my contributors here. I really appreciate you guys coming. Of course, Carol and Ed are here every week too. So
Sure.
I don't, yeah.
Well, as I said, and I will repeat this once more, like you have to go after Susan and read all these comments, because I think we love you, all of us. We love you. And we're so grateful for your book. Chris, do you want to say something? You want to ask your question? Or
Yeah, I've
should
got a
we-
question I want to wait until the end to ask, just a kind of a summary. But if nobody else has a question, I've got a list here and I'll continue on. Yeah?
Go ahead, yes.
So one of the things that, Susan, you're really, really good at is reminding us that it's okay when we feel like we're in over our heads, of making us feel comfortable asking those like stupid questions. You know, we all well, maybe not all of us, but I think the majority of us anyways reach this point where our mind is just blown, or where we just feel like, oh my gosh, there's so much here. Am I even capable of understanding this much of it? And you just have a way where you help soothe those rough edges. You're encouraging for us. And I want to know, maybe this is putting you on the spot, but for people that are in that situation right now, what's your message?
I'm there too.
Yeah. That's what you always say, actually.
I'm there too. I mean, I have to say, you know, in the years when I was going over to Steve's, you know, twice a week, you know, I was, hi, can I come in? And he kept saying I could, so I kept coming back. Anyway, and so often he'd start talking about something and I'd think, why am I sitting here? This is crazy. There should be an amazing top level physicist. There should be an advanced level engineer. There should be, you know, a really, you know, somebody who's really brilliant in medicine. There should be, but it's me. And there's a concept I remember from Buddhism that you have to take the one seat. You know, there's a seat that's being put there for you, and you got to be willing to sit in it. And so even though I was sitting there thinking, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a, you know, whatever, just go down the list of all the things. I'm not a chemist, you know. And then I sort of had to train myself to say, okay, until somebody better is here to take this seat, I'm the one who's in it. I got to make the most of it. And that was all I tried to do.
I so hear you. Go ahead, Graham.
No, after you, Chris.
I was just gonna say, I so hear you, because I have felt the same way. It's like, what am I doing here? How did this happen? I know nothing, and yet have come to a place where it's okay that there's so much I don't know. What I am able to do is sit in that seat, and somehow I've managed to contribute to this community just by being me and by really focusing on what I am able to do. So you've given me that, Steve has given me that, Graham, and everybody who keeps showing up. It's a very fulfilling place to be. Graham, you have something, and I saw Steve was
It's direct to what you said, because Susan, your knowledge of the subject comes out in the book to all the people here. So all those people you listed of professional medics and physicists and all those people are somewhere watching this, and the book can appeal to everyone at some level. It's a matter of recognizing it. It presents itself in the best way so that it will appeal to lots of people. I want to ask you another question.
Yeah.
What were the obstacles in the way of writing it? What were the really sticky things that made you throw up your hand up in despair at times?
Thanks. Well, ordering the book, ordering the book. I don't mean that in a Handspring way, folks. I mean, getting the order that the material needed to be in, taking the nonlinear omnidirectionality of it and putting it in I'm going to take you on a path. I'm going to be your tour guide as we take a little walk through biotensegrity and how to get the pathway. But another one was me, my things about what I thought I understood. I talk about this a couple of times in the book. I write about this, about how I would find something or see something and think, wait a minute, how come nobody talked about that? I was building a tetrahedron of tetrahedrons, kind of trying to make a physical Sierpinski's tetrahedron, which is something I have you do in the book. And I looked inside and there was an octahedron. I thought, what the hell is that doing there? You know, I'm only building tetrahedrons. How is there an octahedron all of a sudden in there? And why didn't anybody tell me this? And of course I run inside, you know, I was out in the back patio building with toothpicks and marshmallows. And I look in Graham's book and I look in Daniel Claude's book, and very clearly, it's very clearly articulated with photographs. But until I built it, I didn't know it. didn't get it. I didn't see an octahedron as an emergent shape that naturally comes out of a tetrahedron. And I don't know if I could have seen it, even though I was looking at the photographs without having built it. So I was an obstacle to myself, probably the most.
Okay, Carol Boggs, she has a comment and maybe a question.
I have a question. Yes, I put it in the chat. Susan, do you have any thoughts about how we can help the reductionist scientists make the paradigm leap?
What's the joke about science progressing one grave at a time?
Something like that.
You know, when you know, Thomas Kuhn talks about this, right, in his book, and he talks about paradigm shifts. When someone has to more and more desperately grab at anything they can to hold on to the paradigm they're immersed in, and they realize it's just getting harder and harder to do, and then the world around them is changing and shifting, they get to a point where they have to let go, or become less relevant to the conversation, I guess, because the conversation's moved on. You know, it's moved on. So it's their choice. We can't, you know, we can control what we do, right? And then everybody else controls what they do. So the more we get this wonderful cross-disciplinary conversations going about all of this, and this is what I hope we're aiming to really bring together when we go to Montreal in 2021, which I hope we get to do in a physical way. It's that cross-disciplinary open discussion. And I'll just say, because you mentioned this, or you make me think of it, sometimes I get an email from somebody, or, you know, call, and they're concerned because there are two people in the field who don't agree. And if you're coming in the world of science, that's totally expected. Nobody's expecting everyone to agree. But in some fields, we're expecting agreement. You know, this has value, this doesn't. This was a good play, this was a crummy play, whatever. This was a great film, this was a terrible film. Some fields we expect agreement and some fields we don't. And it's okay, it's actually productive and beneficial. We're not fighting with each other. We're not being, you know, acrimonious or whatever it is. We are having a productive, generative, useful conversation where we're each coming from our own perspective and the fullness and the value of our own perspective. So if it's done with respect, then we can have a lovely conversation with somebody who's very conventionally trained in biomechanics.
So Susan, I want to just take you back to something you said a couple of minutes ago, and this is regarding paradigm shift and how we are really creating this diverse community. And it is through our sharing of this information and having the public knowledge grow. And to bring another question to you, we've got not only, you know, 40 people plus on this call here on Zoom, we've got people on YouTube Live and people who are going to see this in the future. Can I ask you to give us all, every person here, a challenge that's going to help disseminate this information? Just one small thing or a couple of small things where each person here right now can choose to just help move this work forward.
Build a tensegrity and give it away.
Okay, great. I'll do that. Who else? Who else is willing to do that?
Put these in other people's hands. Once you feel this, you can't deny it.
There's a fellow in Victoria, BC, who was building tensegrities and hanging them all over trees everywhere. We tried to get him to come to the big in Vancouver when Steve was here.
Anastasia, did you have your hand up?
No. I asked them to put their hand up to say if they would do that.
Exactly. I think we all say yes, we'll do that. Okay, I want to read this from Jenny. Okay, I hope I've written this correctly. She says, originally a math science phobe, I attend these meetings every week and find the phobias diminishing. With all my excitement of the stuff and matter that is life increases and makes so much more sense. Susan's approach perfectly matches us more kinesthetic learning types. I can't wait to explore her book. And I have to say that I think every week, for those of you who are here and of us that we're here, we're just learning. We're just kind of letting pieces sink at a time, and that really helps us with the understanding, and hopefully we can build more vocabulary. You know, in my case, I can say I have more confidence to fight for this. If I can do so, right? I'm getting more like, you know, okay, what do you think? Where are the levers? Tell me, right? So, yeah, that's my case. I don't know. I think I'm going to invite Dr. Steve.
Okay, but hold on, Mariana, who was that comment from? I'm sorry.
Jenny Sterling.
Ah, thank you, Jenny. Can I just respond?
Sure.
I think one of the things that helped me prepare for this, and it's what got me into kinesthetic learning, okay, in a formal way. I was working as a music teacher, and the principal of the school was having us learn about Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences. And my desk was in the cafegimatorium aftercare room. And the little kids would come up with their books and say, Miss Susan, can you help me with this? Can you help me with this? And they didn't know that I, wasn't on the clock. I wasn't being paid to help them with their homework, but it's a second grader asking you for help. You don't say no, I'm a mom, And so then I was hired by the aftercare as a tutor. And I developed this specialty for tutoring kids in math. And the way that happened was I was given this kid one day, here's this child, here are the flashcards, just drill her until she gets it. And I got this feeling in the pit of my stomach. And I thought, oh my God, they still haven't figured out how to teach this. Since I was a kid, and at that time, I did not know my multiplication tables. How could I expect this kid to know them? I didn't have them memorized. I couldn't memorize them. And I thought, this is a puzzle that still hasn't been solved. And I have to figure out how to solve this problem. And I went down, and that's when I got my master's in kinesthetic learning. And I've done a lot of math tutoring with kids who basically, and I just don't have time for it as much these days, but I still do a little bit, and I love doing it because I basically would say to the parents, look, when you've exhausted all your other resources and somebody tells you this person is unteachable, and I'm talking about including people who have been diagnosed with dyscalculia, where we just say you'll never be able to do it, so you can just let that go. I say no. The math is in your body. It's already in there. You already know about proportion and number. You know more than you think. And so that whole thing prepared me for this. So good for you for, where is she, Jenny, for being willing to open up to something that's brought, no, there's PTSD, educational math trauma. I know all about it. So thank you. Okay, back to you, Mariana, you were gonna say.
I think Dr. Steve has something to say. Oh, I'm listening myself.
That who has? That who has?
Dr. Levin. There you go. Yes.
Well, am I on? Yes, I'm on. Well, I actually didn't want to say much except to let you know that I've been swimming over my head for over 40 years. And my advice to you is don't tread water, just keep swimming. I mean, this is a problem. I had no idea what I was doing when I got into this. I just was unhappy with the concept that I was given for biomechanics. And I just said, well, I have to learn this. And I would I come up with a concept, and I bumped into a bunch of engineers, and they would say, son, and I was already 5 or 10 years older than they were. They would say, son, you have to go and take 5 years of engineering school before you can talk about this. And I said, no, you have to understand that this is, physics 101. And if you know that much, I'm ahead of you. So you just have to have confidence and just believe in yourself and do it. And that's what I did.
Yeah. So Steve took the one seat. You see, it came to him, and then he's got no choice, right? He has to go to his wife and say, our income's going to go down because I'm not going to do as much surgery as I was planning on doing because I can fix these people with manual therapy. So why should I cut open their bodies? When we get in there, we don't know what we're doing. We think we do, we don't. I mean, Steve, am I misrepresenting your story there?
No, it's true, true.
So we're being called to take a step.
Okay, do we have any more questions to add? Or do you want to say more on that, Susan?
No, I'm
going to ask Craig if he's ready. Hold on, where are you, Craig?
Hi, Craig.
Yes, you are.
Hi.
You're muted. Yes.
I'm still trying to figure out Zoom, so I'm trying to get a screen share so I can show a book which shows the anatomy of the skeleton in an entirely different way.
Craig, right now your video's not on, so you'll have to turn on your video.
I'm trying to get Zoom.
You're already on Zoom.
Okay, you're in Zoom.
Okay, I have a question here. Mariana, could you,
There he is.
Craig, okay.
Okay. Right. Now I've got a book in Dutch, which is, I posted the title in the chat, and it shows the skeleton in an entirely different way. It shows that your fingers.
Okay. Craig, do you have the book with you? Could you just hold up the book and I'll spotlight you?
No, I don't. I only have it on a PDF.
Okay.
I don't know if I can share my screen.
You should be able to.
Look for a little green button at the bottom of the frame that says share screen.
Yeah, okay. I'm trying to get the book too.
And while you're doing that, Craig, we'll take another question. Is that all right?
I've just pushed share and I've got a blank screen. Yes, that's fine. I will try to figure it out.
Yeah, and if our screens change and we all of a sudden see it, we'll let you know. Good.
Yeah.
I don't have more questions in my list as far as I believe.
Can we get hey Ed, can you just say hello to everybody? Maybe we could just take a second to hear from any contributors that we haven't heard from, and maybe that's only Ed, because we did hear from Carol.
Doug.
You would have to, and we heard from Doug.
Did we hear from Doug? I don't think
Doug
so.
is unmuted
We
now.
didn't hear from Doug. Okay, so we need
Doug,
to hear from Ed and from Doug.
Doug,
Ed,
you're on.
I guess I talked so much at the last one that it seems like I talked already today. I'm so excited to see to see the rest of the book. It's I love how you work, Susan, and always bringing it back to the experience. I think is so powerful, because I think so many times when people get lost, it's because there's a random concept floating around. But when you make it tangible, I think that's powerful for everybody here. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Ed?
Yeah, I would just echo what Doug said. And I was thinking about our early days in Tai Chi, Susan, way back, and how biotensegrity really helps to make sense of some of these cryptic comments from the ancient Chinese and the classics, doesn't it? So that's it's a wonderful thing that you've done, and I look forward to reading the book.
And Ed, it makes me think, I think of everybody here, I've known you the longest, because when do you think we met?
It was in the 90s.
If it was the 90s, it was the early 90s, my friend.
Yeah, the early 90s, yeah.
Wow, that's great.
That's all I have to say. Thank you, Susan. Yes.
Thank you, and thanks for your contribution. It's really, you guys are gonna love these contributions.
Okay, so I think we have it sorted out now, Craig. Yeah, Mariana? And meanwhile, did Carol have her hand up, or was that? Yeah, Carol, do you wanna, Mariana, will you unmute Carol? And then if you like, I can put you and Craig into a
Sorry,
break.
we've got two Carols, so Carol Davis, I think, right?
Oh, I saw Carol Davis then.
I
sorry.
wanted to clarify that it's Carol Boggs' beautiful chapter in the book. I did not write a chapter for the book. I just wrote that long page of recommendation, but it was Carol Boggs, who is the—
Yes, that's right. Carol and Ed are both part of DC Big, as is Dodi DeSanto, and I'm trying to remember if there's another DC Big person in the contributors, but anyway, and so these are people that have been with me. Well, I think this is the question you said you were going to get to at some point, Chris, but in community, learning in community, just like getting together periodically, and Carol Boggs was the one who said, can we just focus on Jean-Claude Guimberteau's book, for the next meeting? And, and everybody had something to bring every time when we would get together.
So Mariana, do you want me to put you and Craig in a breakout room to sort this out or not?
Okay, so you take care of the questions, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll take care of the questions.
I just want to add something. I just want to say we have a lot more to offer on how the body moves, but I think it's a topic in itself, so we'll save it for another time.
Wait, Steve, what do you say that again, please?
There was a question about how the body moves, and
Summer's
way
question.
back, and I thought that it just wouldn't. It would take far too long a time to give you the answer here, and it needs a whole slideshow. So we'll save it for another time. But there is an answer to it.
All right.
I too was still stuck on that, Summer. And I was like Steve, I just thought, oh boy, do I even say anything at all? Because, this is a huge one. But for us to ponder, okay, and that is that when we self-develop, when we become out of the dynamic action of the sperm fertilizing the egg, and how the embryo develops itself so beautifully framed by many of the discussions we've had on here, and Jaap has talked to us about in such a beautiful phenomenological way. Where did that inspiration for that flow, that movement come from? And you might want to say, well, it came from the egg and the sperm, but well, where did the egg get it? Where did the sperm get it? I'm constantly thinking about this in terms of subtle energy, of course, because that's where my mind goes. This whole biotensegrity matrix being the flow system for information in wave form, in vibrational form. And my mind lands on the concept of chi, the Eastern concept of chi, of vital energy that we come in, that everything alive has this vital energy to it. And is it so simple to just say, well, it just came from the Big Bang, you know, everything exploded, and that energy just perpetuates itself in everything that's alive. And I'm now thinking about the science and the Akashic field and the whole concept of waves versus fields, and that we're in a field of energy. And I'm going to stop. I promise.
No, go ahead.
These are the things that some are simple question of how do we move? And obviously she knew that there was something wrong with the joints being the source of movement in the body. But then it gets into such a bigger idea of how is biotensegrity manifesting this everything moves concept, and where does that come from? So I think that might be a little bit about maybe what Steve's getting at too. It's a huge topic.
And I'm just going to jump in with something that one of my daughter's lovely friends said to me once, which was, it kind of blew my mind and put my head on a new track. But so I'm going to say, we continue moving. All we can ever do is continue to move, right? So like, how does the body move? It never wasn't moving. So we can reconfigure. That's all we can ever, that's all we're ever doing, right? In some ways. But anyway, so then I think back, you know, and we talk about, you know, the primordial soup and all that sort of stuff and how life began. And so I was talking to this friend of my daughter's about it. It's a biologist. And I said, you know, so something somewhere figured out how to take sunlight and, you know, something happened and it became this thing. And he said, well, maybe it was sunlight. He said, I think it's more likely that it was deep in the ocean with the heat, with the trenches, and that's where it happened, and that the sunlight was an adaptation. Oh my God. I mean, because I realized, of course, right? Because we go down way past the sunlight and there are living things. And it's something to do with the material and the heat. And there's life down there and there's no sunlight. So then those living things get closer and closer, and then they port, you know, their energy processing systems. And the adaptation is taking sunlight and doing that, because now I don't have the hot water in the trench. Is that wild? And Anastasia, I want to hear what you have to say, because I know you've been working, you've worked with biology and with things that live in the ocean. And
oh yeah, I'm just laughing and being thrilled by that proposition that, yeah, maybe sunlight is secondary, because the chemical process and the heat generated to produce the energy, I mean, yeah, that was already there, and it is still going on at the ocean trenches, and that's what all those films and those fumaroles and the wonderful filter feeding organisms that are down there. But even before that, the unicellular organisms that were considered the origin, I mean, yeah, where did they form? Where did they start? Were they at the level of being able to receive sunlight, or was it deeper down? Were chloroplasts a later evolutionary development? Probably.
Right. Because in our minds, we go down deep into the ocean, and you hear them on the film saying, how could anything live at this depth? Well, what if that's all there was? What if that was the beginning? There flips your head.
Yeah, and all those lives, all those creatures that live in dark caves. There are so many creatures that live in the dark. So yeah, interesting. Chemistry.
Right.
Or electrons and photons.
Okay, so
which are the basis of chemistry.
I'm looking at the time. I don't know, Craig, were you able to figure out how to share?
He had to reboot his computer, so I think he left the meeting and he's trying to come back.
He's back again.
Ah,
So
he's back. Okay.
give us a thumbs up or unmute yourself and let us know if you want to share or if you're able to share, and then we've got to wind up.
There's a incompatibility and I can't share my screen with
Okay, I'll tell you what, Craig, if you want to send that image to us, I guess we need permission to put it in the newsletter or a link to it, then we could put that in the newsletter if you could find a
I've
link.
given the ISBN number.
Okay, great. Rachel, is that okay?
Okay, great. Yeah, maybe we can pop it into a newsletter. That would be great. And Craig, thanks for bringing that to our attention, because anything that makes you think in a new way, anything that moves your mind is, I think, good for us.
What the book shows is that it's got pictures, and its pictures shows that the patterns repeat in the biology and the skeleton. So your fingers are the same as your teeth. So your jawbone is also your leg, and your hips connected to your jawbone with your toes and fingers are your teeth, top and bottom. And it's just the patterns repeat and repeat and repeat. And there's a sort of a hierarchy in the body, and it's very important. Tensegrity is not just a model like this. It's repeats and repeats to smaller and smaller scales. And it's the repeating pattern that's important. So there's tension, compression, and repetibility in scale. And I think that I've discovered in the last month that repeatability in scale is very, very fundamental to tensegrity and biotensegrity.
Right. So in my book, I have that in the like I say, I take you from the triangles to the shapes to the volumetrics, and then to the spirals, and then into the patterns, because the spirals are one pattern, right? The helical stuff. But then there are, we do talk about fractality. I didn't want to name the chapter fractals because I also wanted it to be wider than that. But the fractals and the fractal nature of living organisms is mainly focused on in the patterns chapter. And I have you learn how to make some of your own fractals. So
I also would like to avoid the fractal terminology for mathematical reasons. As you say, it's broader than that. It's a repetitive, not necessarily fractal in mathematical terms. But the concept's broader than that. But it is.
Okay, this is a great discussion, Craig, and thank you, because Graham and I have gone back and forth about this too as well. If I look at where that word comes from, right? So this is where I'm comfortable using the word fractal, even when we're talking about non-mathematical fractals, right? The first thing that happened with Mandelbrot was that he was identifying a pattern of repetition in sound waves, I believe it was, that reminded him of these mathematical patterns that were called monsters and pathological and things like that, because the mathematicians would kind of feel like they were getting painted into a corner, or everything was expanding outward infinitely, and they'd kind of, go mad. One of them did. I can't remember his name, but anyway, and Mandelbrot thought, wait a minute, what these sound waves are doing is reminding me of that stuff, and he dove into it. And so it was from my perspective, it was from getting it from the natural world, something that was happening in the natural world that led to then it getting codified in a mathematical way where it can be infinite. Physical, natural world fractals, what I'm going to use that word, can never be endlessly self-similar, right? Obviously, but they can bring up appearances of self-similarity there will be irregularity. So when you look at Romanesco broccoli, you know, or the Koru fern or things like that, you'll see what I'm talking about. And Craig, I completely understand. It has now become, and Graham puts this forward as well, when people hear the word, they think of the mathematical fractal, which is which has the possibility mathematically of being infinitely self-similar. Would that sit okay with you, Craig?
No comment.
Okay, fair enough. Or more for another day. That's good. That's good. I want people to understand this is productive disagreement or productive difference of opinion, that we're not fighting with each other. Okay, we're having useful discussion, that now this is rich territory for more useful discussion because we don't see it the same way. It's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Oh, they disagreed with each other. It was horrible. No, it was really good. So thank you, Craig, for speaking up about that.
And this is really great thing about the Biotensegrity tea parties, is that lots of people can put their input in, not necessarily in this session here, but in the interchange we have between us, and discuss these things, and different ideas coming from tens of dozens, hundreds of different perspectives. We can winkle out an answer that becomes more satisfying to everybody, hopefully, with time. But yeah, as it is, time has now caught us, and we need to bring the session to a close. So let me thank Susan so much for what you've done in presenting, being our star performer here today, and all the contributors to your book and contributed to this session as well. I think, let me thank my co-host, Chris Clancy, and our fellow supporting technical officers, Mariana Barreto and Rachel Tudor, for beavering away in ways that you won't have noticed, but they've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes as well. So I think a little reminder of our sponsors who help to keep this thing afloat. Rachel, if you could do the honors.
I will.
Can I just say, I love the phrase beavering away.
I've never heard that. Yes, thank you, Graham. All right, our Biotensegrity Party events are a production of the Stephen M. Levin Biotensegrity Archive in Washington, D.C., whose mission includes education and building community. Subscribe to our email list and register to join us every week on Zoom, or download our BX 101 self-study guide to beginning biotensegrity at biotensegrityarchive.org. Once again, we want to give a huge thanks to our sponsors, our publisher, Handspring Publishing in East Lothian, Scotland, who have offered everyone on the archive email list a generous coupon for purchasing the books. So thank you so much, Handspring. Thanks also to Fernando Tajaro and Artifact Pro in Madrid for sponsoring us and supplying our archive newsletter readers with a coupon code to get a great discount on his wonderful models. Also, Embodied Biotensegrity and Chris for our technical support, and for the great offerings you already have on there and that are upcoming. Also to the British Fascia Symposium in the UK, which not only organizes their bioannual BFS event, but also other exciting programs. So be sure to check them out. And I think that's it. Back to you.
Thank you, Rachel. I think finally the toast for the occasion should come from Susan to finish proceedings off.
My goodness. Okay. You know, really, this is about, for me, this is about gratitude. And this is about gratitude. Thank you, everybody. Thanks to all of you. You are working so hard, and we're all in this boat together, and it's wonderful to be in the boat with you. Cheers.
Thank you, Susan.